lots of patients over there, and I'm here representing the 1,500 pediatricians across Long Island, Queens, and Brooklyn. And I'm here to talk about the devastating impact that Medicaid cuts would have on children and families right here on Long Island. Pediatricians on Long Island, in New York, and indeed across the country want to tell this administration today, hands off Medicaid! Hands off Medicaid! Hands off Medicaid! Hands off Medicaid!
Hands off Medicaid! Hands off Medicaid! Hands off Medicaid!
But before I do that, I can't not talk about these truly disturbing and really calamitous funding and staffing cuts to the foundational institutions of science in this country. Cuts to the NIH, the CDC, and the FDA, the pinnacles of scientific research and innovation, public health in our country, decimated for no apparent reason. It's nonsensical. They're making us less safe. They're putting our lives and our children's lives at risk with funding cuts trickling down to our local health departments, who will be less able to fight outbreaks that we're experiencing right now. There's a measles outbreak. So we want to tell this administration, hands off science. Hands off science. Hands off science.
Hands off science. Hands off science. Hands off science.
Now at this moment, members of Congress, Republican members of Congress, are planning on cutting $880 billion from Medicaid. And that, my friends, is devastating, and it's unacceptable. We know that Medicaid provides health care for hard-working families across the country. 20% of Americans, 1 in 5, rely on Medicaid for their health care. We know that disabled people get health care through Medicaid. We know that our elderly, in particular those in nursing homes, are funded through Medicaid. But most people also don't realize that nearly 50% of America's children rely on Medicaid for their health care, including 150,000 children right here on Long Island who rely on Medicaid for their well care visits, preventive care for their vaccinations, their developmental screenings, their vision and dental care. We know that children who receive Medicaid are more likely to be healthy, to graduate high school and college, to get jobs, to be contributing members of society. We know this, but what many people don't know is that Medicaid will fund care for children if they should experience a medical calamity, if your child has special needs, or a complex condition requiring hospitalization or home care, and your insurance tops out, Medicaid kicks in. Medicaid. We know our hospitals and our pediatric specialty offices that we're so fortunate to have access to for our children here on Long Island, they rely on Medicaid. The services they provide to Long Island's children would not be sustainable without Medicaid. So hands off Medicaid.
Hands off Medicaid. Hands off Medicaid. Hands off Medicaid. Hands off Medicaid.
Now, our members of Congress tell us, no, they don't want to cut Medicaid. They just want to cut the $880 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse. Well, I've got news for you. They're lying. They're lying. They're lying. Multiple oversight programs have never identified or even suggested anything close to that kind of number. They're lying. They claim that no, if we just kick off all those people on Medicaid who aren't working, we can find that money. I'm here to tell you, they're lying. Nearly all people who receive Medicaid work. They work hard. They often work 2 jobs. Members of Congress are lying. Republican members of Congress are lying. Those who don't work are caring for dependent or disabled family members or are in school. My own congressman in CD1 has said, if we could just prevent the undocumented immigrants from getting Medicaid, that'll help us save $880 billion. And that's another lie. Because although I believe, as many here I'm sure do as well, that healthcare is a human right, the congressman should know, he must know, that undocumented immigrants are barred from receiving federal Medicaid funding. So that, my friends, is another lie. They're lying.
They're lying. They're lying. They're lying. They're
not finding the level of waste, fraud, and abuse that is simply not there, not finding people on Medicaid that don't work, and not finding undocumented immigrants receiving federal Medicaid funds, that $880 billion will come right out of the funding that our children and hardworking families rely on here at Long Island. Literally cutting a lifeline for the 150,000 children on Long Island that get their Medicaid care and who are our neighbors and our friends. So we're here to tell our members of Congress and to tell this administration, hands off Medicaid.
Hands off Medicaid! Hands off Medicaid! Hands off Medicaid! Hands off Medicaid!
All right, I'm now going to introduce Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds, who is the president and CEO of the Family and Children's Association.
Are you mad yet?
Yes!
Are you mad yet?
Yes!
Are you mad yet?
Yes!
All right, let's do something about it.
Yes!
My name's Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds. I'm the president and CEO of Family and Children's Association. We serve families and kids all across Long Island.
Put it closer to your mouth.
Here's what I want to talk to you about today. And one of you had a sign that talked about mental health and addiction. The cuts to addiction programs in this country are cataclysmic. Here's a number for you. 1 million. Say it after me. 1 million.
1 million.
That's how many folks have died of fentanyl poisonings and overdoses in the past 10 years. 1 million. Say it.
1 million.
It didn't have to be that way. Just as we're starting to turn a corner on that, we're starting to see the numbers go down. What does the Trump administration do? They cut programs. It can't happen. No, 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 no. So here's what we need to do. We've brought those numbers down in the past year. Fewer people are dying. Today, 75 fewer people will die of overdoses. And that's great because that means there were fewer empty chairs around the Thanksgiving table this time around. But we've got to keep going until that number is zero. Overdoses are completely preventable. We can't stop until we eliminate them altogether. Cutting drug treatment, cutting prevention programs in schools, cutting research at the NIH, cutting funding at the CDC, sentences folks to death. It's unacceptable. I want to talk about suicides. Raise your hand if your mental health has struggled in the past 5 years. Have you suffered? All right, if you all didn't raise your hand, you all are lying because this is enough to drive us all nuts. We need to make sure that our kids and families have the services they need. We need to make sure that we're reaching into schools and giving them treatment. We want to make sure that they have treatment not next week, not a month from now. Treatment on demand right here, right now. You heard from Eve about the cuts to NIH and FDA and everywhere else. They call it flooding the zone. If we want to keep people alive and we want to keep them healthy, we need to make sure that we fight back. They say cut back, we say 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 fight back. Thank you for being here. Thanks to law enforcement keeping us safe. Thanks to the members of Congress that are here today. Thanks for being here. We got this. They say cut back, we say fight back.
Before I introduce the next speaker, I just want to take a minute to say that this is a moment in history that requires all people of good conscience to show up for each other. Yes. We don't want to wonder one day where we were and what we were doing when they came for Social Security and Medicaid and veteran services and national parks. We don't want to wonder what we were doing when they came for crucial medical research and disease prevention. Or our immigrant neighbors and trans kids. Our right to clean water and a livable planet for our children. We want to know exactly where we were when they tried to erase the accomplishments of women and people of color. When they attempted to dismantle our public schools, abandon our allies, and destroy our democratic system of government. Everyone here knows where history will say they were, and we need to here. We're showing up, we're standing together, and we're speaking out, and we're making good trouble. Right, everyone? Good trouble.
Good trouble.
Good trouble. Good trouble. Good trouble. Good trouble. Good trouble. That's right. And now I would like to introduce Greg Perlis. He's a public school teacher and also a union leader.
Go, Stephanie.
So I've been teaching history in New York State's public schools for 30 years. So let's not bury the lead. Let's not bury the lead. This is a war on children. Tens of millions of kids with disabilities. Tens of millions of kids who are poor. Tens of millions of kids with disabilities. Tens of millions of kids who are poor. Tens of millions of kids who are hungry. Kids struggling with mental health. Kids who are black, brown, and indigenous. Kids trying to read. Kids trying to learn. Kids trying to graduate. Kids trying to go to college. It's a war on the most vulnerable kids in our country being waged by the richest and most powerful people in our country. So we have to ask ourselves why. It's not the money. The Federal Department of Education last year accounted for 4% of the federal budget. Cutting federal spending by 4% is like saying you're spending way too much money on lunch. You can't afford $20 a day for food anymore, so you're drawing the line at $19.20. The wider underlying reason for dismantling the Department of Education and for gutting Medicare funds for nursing and health care and early intervention in schools, and for criminalizing curriculum, and for blackmailing school funding, and for allowing ICE into schools, and for extorting colleges, is that this is also a war on democracy. Every authoritarian regime in history, has used its classrooms to program its kids. Authoritarians subordinate schools and students to the will of the state. They use schools to manufacture consent. They use schools to indoctrinate. They use schools to narrow the definitions of liberty and freedom and individuality and humanity. In short, authoritarians use schools to engineer tyranny, even as they fear schools for their power to promote independence, dissent, and resistance. By every metric, they are coming for our kids. And in the words of those great Long Island cultural icons, Twisted Sister, we're not going to take it. So let's say it loud enough that they can hear us from here to DC, to Tesla HQ, to Mar-a-Lago. I'm going to say it, you say it back. Hands off our books.
Hands off our books.
Hands off our schools.
Hands off our schools.
Hands off our kids.
Hands off our kids.
We won't be ruled.
We won't be ruled.
Hands off our books.
Hands off our books.
Hands off our schools.
Hands off our schools.
Hands off our kids.
Hands off our kids.
We won't be ruled.
We won't be ruled.
Fight the power, everyone. Thank you. Individuals here today. Hands off our water. Hands off immigrant communities. Hands off healthcare. Hands off our democracy. Like you, Food and Water Watch has been keeping track of the vicious cuts and claims that Trump and his cronies have been making. They say there's tons of government waste and fraud. Well, there's certainly wasters and fraudsters in the White House, and we know their names. And there's a ton of waste in the Pentagon, but we all know that that's not what they're talking about. They call firing the entire staff, at the Energy Affordability Office cutting government waste. They're eliminating grants for clean water projects counted on by Rockville Center, Williston Park, Manor Haven, Great Neck, Port Washington, Westbury, Bethpage, Hicksville, and Farmingdale. They call those cutbacks fighting waste and fraud. They say the same thing about the firing of the vast majority of EPA scientists. The lists go on and on. And who's been saying this besides Trump and Musk? Long Island's own Lee Zeldin. Here. This has been appointed by Trump.
Fuck Lee Zeldin! Fuck Lee Zeldin! Fuck Lee Zeldin! Fuck Lee Zeldin!
No, thank you.
Good.
He's not my type.
Zeldin is the one who's been put in charge of slashing EPA's budget 65%. He calls his relationship with Musk and Joe, quote unquote, an incredible partnership. Christine Whitman, former Republican governor in New Jersey and former head of the EPA, calls Zeldin the water boy for the likes of Trump and Musk. Zeldin sheds his beliefs. He used to pose as a somewhat moderate on the environment, like a lizard sheds his skin. And Zeldin is similarly cold-blooded. You have to be cold-blooded to cut programs related to keeping us safe from cancer chemicals. Zeldin is moving to repeal dozens of environmental regulations that limit toxic pollutions. He's recently terminated programs designed to address long-standing contaminations in Louisiana's Cancer Alley. He doesn't give a hoot about communities of color who have long suffered that contamination. He's intent upon stopping the EPA from regulating and limiting greenhouse gases. He's a horror show, and he's coming to Woodbury next Friday. We plan to be there to greet him, because what's going on is shameful and outrageous. At Food and Water Watch, we know that our fellow Americans are not on board with the plans the billionaires and disciples of greed have unleashed. A slim majority of voters in Nassau and Suffolk may have voted for Trump, but they did not vote for an end to all intelligent policymaking. Not one of my Republican neighbors favors toxics in their water, and only a minuscule fraction favor a country where corporations run rampant over worker and community health and safety. We need to be at the bus terminals, train stations, and post offices, letting our neighbors know that we need to be on the same side when it comes to protecting our water, food, and health. Next Friday morning at 8 a.m. outside the Crest Hollow Country Club, we'll be greeting Zeldin. Don't worry, there's parking in the Woodbury Shopping Center next door. Please join us in sending Zeldin a very clear message. Hands off!
This is what democracy looks like.
This is what democracy looks like.
I can't hear you. Let everybody across this nation know. This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. All right, make some noise for hands off. Make some noise. At this time, and I'm James Hodge from Denver by the Sea in Long Beach. Excited to be here. Let's make some noise for Mary Tassiati. She lives in Long Beach and the Director of Labor Studies from Hofstra University. Come on, make some noise, show us
All right, Long Beach is in the house. Make some noise if you work for a living. All right, fellow workers and friends, I'm a mom, I'm a grandma, I'm an educator, I'm an organizer, and I'm a pissed off Long Islander in good company who's here to say to Donald Trump and Elon Musk and everyone associated with this administration, which is hell-bent on destroying our economy and our country, the country that hard-working people like my parents and grandparents and your parents and grandparents and you and I have built through years of sweat. Hands off our jobs! Hands off our jobs! Hands off our jobs! Hands off our jobs! Hands off our jobs!
Hands off our jobs.
The U.S. Constitution begins with 3 words. We, the people. Well, my friends, we are the people, and our government is supposed to work for us. But this government has targeted us, the people, hard-working people, as the enemy. Their first line of attack is to take our jobs and gut our vital services, most of which we pay for by taxes on our hard-earned money. Let me give you a few details about how all this is going down. In February and March of 2025, Elon Musk and his minions at Doge axed over 280,000 workers. These workers oversee special education services for our children, protect us from consumer fraud, prosecute criminals, care for our national parks, conserve our natural resources, provide care and services to our veterans, and keep our Social Security Administration running, and so much more. Musk says the firings are necessary to ensure efficiency and cut waste. Well, we call bullshit! 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 This is a Long Island I know and love. We know bullshit when we see it. And when we smell it. And when we hear it. And we know that Musk's words are like shiny objects designed to distract us from what's really on the agenda. Selling off our government piece by piece to privatize our public services, kick our seniors off Social Security, and make profit for the few at the expense of the many. And let me tell you something, April isn't looking any better for our workers and our public services. Just last week, at the urging of Robert Kennedy Jr., the Department of Health and Human Services fired 10,000 health workers. And this, on top of the forced retirement of 10,000 health workers in March. These workers keep our food safe, protect us from disease, educate us about health and safety, oversee the programs that connect the most vulnerable among us with services they need to live independently, and so much more. Kennedy says the firings are necessary for his plan to make America healthy again. Bullshit! 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 How will we be healthy when there's no one to ensure our food is safe? No one to track infectious diseases? No one to research treatments and cures for diseases? The short answer is we won't. We won't be healthy. We won't be safe unless we stand up and demand an end to this attack on workers right now. And our jobs won't be safe either, because if the federal government gets away with firing thousands of union workers without cause, then it won't be long before other employers start drilling down on their workers too, union and non-union alike. In the labor movement, we have a saying, an injury to one is an injury to all. That saying has never been truer than it is right now. Federal workers and their unions are fighting back. They're filing lawsuits, and thanks to the courts, some of them are getting their jobs back for now. And they're speaking out, not just to defend their jobs, but to defend our rights, our services, and our government from being destroyed by billionaires who want to line their pockets at our expense. They're standing up for us, and we need to stand with them, because the president is fighting back too. He's punishing workers for daring to exercise their constitutional rights to speak out against Musk and Doge by taking away their unions. Why? Because unions give workers a voice. Unions build worker power through collective action. And workers with the power of a union behind them are the last thing this administration wants. They want us to be quiet!